I bowed my head to a servant who was trembling before me, even though I was supposed to be the one above him. People always looked at me strangely, as if a noble smiling so easily was something unnatural. If her hands were hurting and cracking from the cold, then helping her just felt like the obvious thing to do. They called me kind, but to me, it was never kindness. It was simply how things should be. But this land, this frozen and unforgiving place at the edge of the kingdom, was never meant for someone like me. Even in this cold, lifeless place, I never stopped smiling, no matter how harsh the world around me was. When I handed her the oil and told her to take care of her hands, I didn't think it was anything special, but the way she looked at me, with tears in her eyes, made me realize that something so simple meant far more to them than I understood. I never tried to be kind. I just couldn't ignore the pain of the people right in front of me. And before I knew it, everyone around me began to smile because of me, as if my existence alone brought them warmth in this frozen place. When I saw him at the door, shaking and out of breath, I knew he wasn't afraid of me, but of what would happen next. He looked at me like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. His eyes were filled with fear, as if being late meant pain or punishment. I didn't need to ask. This fear came from somewhere far more cruel. Even here, his body still trembled like he was expecting the whip at any second. I looked at him calmly and said, "You're Hans, right?" The moment I said his name, his entire body froze in shock. He clutched his chest like his heart might give out at any second. His face twisted in fear, as if he'd already accepted whatever punishment was coming. But instead of anger, I raised my voice and called out, "Schiller!" Schiller stepped into the room, his cold gaze sweeping over everything. I turned slightly, watching him approach without a hint of emotion. His eyes sharpened, already judging the situation before a single word was spoken. Hans flinched violently, his fear spiking the moment Schiller appeared. Schiller silently held out a small pouch, his expression unreadable. The man hesitated before reaching out, confusion mixing with fear. I watched calmly as Schiller placed the pouch into his trembling hands. The room fell silent as he realized he wasn't being punished. A faint smile formed on my face as I said, "Use it properly." For a moment, even I was caught off guard by what had just happened. But as I glanced at Schiller, I quickly understood this was all intentional. A faint smile crossed my face as the atmosphere in the room completely shifted, from fear to something closer to hope. And for the first time, everyone was looking at me differently. I could feel their eyes on me, even as I said nothing. Whispers spread quietly behind my back, but I didn't turn around. Schiller stepped forward and handed me a sealed letter. The moment I broke the seal, I knew everything was about to change. And this time, it wasn't something I had planned. They looked at me with admiration, almost reverence. Among nobles or commoners, it didn't matter anymore. I walked forward like everything was under control. But the moment I was alone, my chest tightened. Something inside me wasn't right. The moment I stood up, my body suddenly gave out. A sharp pain tore through my chest, stealing my breath. Before I could react, blood spilled from my lips. My vision blurred, and my legs stopped listening to me. By the time they noticed, I was already collapsing. Something felt wrong, way too wrong. The old man's eyes narrowed as he examined me closely. "This isn't normal," he muttered under his breath. A strange energy inside me started spiraling out of control. "No, this isn't normal. The mana inside me is going wild. I can't control it anymore." The overflowing vessel, the old man's voice turned heavy, almost cautious. Silence filled the room as the meaning of those words settled in. So that's it. They finally understand what I've become. My body lay still, but inside, something was already changing. Time itself felt distorted, as if day and night no longer mattered. Cold stone, damp air. I could barely feel anything anymore. Days passed, or maybe weeks. Time meant nothing in this place. I wasn't locked here for punishment. They were watching me. Every breath I took, something inside me kept growing stronger. And those faces on the wall, they weren't just stains. Something inside me snapped, like a dam finally breaking. The pressure, it wasn't pain anymore. It was power, trying to escape. My body couldn't hold it. Cracks spread through me from the inside. Then everything burst. Stone, chains, even the air shattered around me. When it stopped, I was still standing, but something wasn't the same anymore. My breath caught. I was still alive after all that. The energy didn't disappear. It settled, like it was waiting inside me. I clenched my teeth. This wasn't normal, not even close. Then I saw her, lying there, barely breathing. For a second, everything went quiet, like the world was watching what I'd do next. Something inside me wasn't just power anymore. It was changing me. Fragments of myself, memories, instincts, splitting apart, then merging back. I realized it then. This wasn't my first time here. That room, that body, those versions of me, it all meant one thing. I wasn't just surviving. I was being remade. He didn't get back up. Not after that. And somehow, I knew it was because of me. The moment I woke up, everything had already changed. They looked at me differently. Like I wasn't the same person anymore. Even I could feel it. Something inside me had already broken. I didn't even realize what I was doing until it was already too late. My hand moved on its own, and the moment I touched him, everything snapped. They were staring at me, like I was something they shouldn't have created. No one said it out loud, but I could hear it anyway. No one said a word, but I understood everything from their faces. I walked through the corridor, but it felt like I didn't belong here anymore. Something inside me had changed. I could feel it, spreading, quietly. Even my own reflection felt unfamiliar, like I was looking at someone else. My thoughts were colder now, clear, but wrong in a way I couldn't explain. And for the first time, I wasn't scared of it. I'm alive. Even after everything, I'm still here. This body, this place. So this is where I ended up. She's crying. For me. For someone like me. I don't understand it. It doesn't feel unpleasant. If this is the life I've been given, then I'll accept it. They're watching me, whispering like I'm not even here. This place, even the air feels different from what I knew. So this is how they see me. Not as a person, but as something dangerous. It doesn't matter. Their fear, their judgment, none of it means anything to me. If they try to bind me, then I'll break everything that ties me down. I walked past them slowly, acting like I didn't notice the way they looked at me, like I didn't hear a single whisper behind my back. But the moment I was alone, that silence pressed down on me, even harder than their voices. Then it started again, that strange power inside me. It wouldn't stay quiet. The air trembled, furniture cracked. Even the people around me couldn't stay standing. I couldn't control it. No matter how hard I tried to suppress it, it just kept overflowing. It hurts, like something inside my chest is being torn apart. No matter how many times this happens, I still can't get used to it. And then I found myself sitting there, alone, like I was being judged, even without anyone saying a word. I tried to stay calm, tried to convince myself that I still had control, that I wasn't becoming something else. But I couldn't just sit there. If I stayed any longer, I felt like I would break completely. So I ran. I ran without thinking, just to get away from everything, from them, from that power, from myself. I kept studying, even when my eyes started to blur, even when I could barely keep them open. At some point, I must have fallen asleep like that, surrounded by books, chasing something I still didn't understand. But this time, it was different. The knowledge wasn't just something I read anymore. It started to take shape. Piece by piece, I began putting it together, like I was rebuilding something that already existed inside me. And then I realized something. This wasn't talent. It was memory. I was exhausted. Not just my body. My mind was breaking first. Every night, the same routine. Books, notes, formulas, and still, nothing made sense. No matter how much I studied, I couldn't close the gap. Others moved forward, naturally, effortlessly, while I was stuck. At some point, I stopped feeling frustrated. I clenched my hand, not out of fear, but to remind myself I was still in control. Everything around me looked the same room, the same silence, but something inside me had already changed. He stood in front of me, polite, calm, obedient, but I could see it, the difference between us. Talent, effort, upbringing. People liked to compare things like that, but to me, it all felt meaningless. Because no matter how hard they tried, they were still moving forward for the first time. Something snapped, not outside, inside me. The moment I lost control, the world answered. Walls cracked, air trembled, and I understood. This power wasn't something I could ignore anymore. He was bleeding, and for a second, everything went silent. I didn't move, didn't panic, didn't even breathe, because deep down, I already knew. This wasn't an accident. It was inevitable. The door opened, and the first person to witness it was someone who wouldn't let this pass. I looked at him, and he looked at me. No words, but it was already decided.
I no longer exist. That was the last thing I told him. I had already made my choice. 20 years passed. Down here, time didn't move. It only piled up. I tried to empty my mind, to forget everything, but the memories wouldn't leave. Lucas was the only one who could still reach me, the only one I allowed to stay. I told myself it didn't matter, that I had already lost everything, but that wasn't true. Are you awake? It's morning outside. I told him I was just thinking about the past. How far back? About 20 years? Lucas brought food. And the books I asked for. A new volume from the Azure Tower. He was still alive. More than 20 years had passed, and nothing had changed. I asked about the outside, but Lucas hesitated. Father had already warned him not to tell me anything. Even without asking, I could tell. Something outside had changed. The books were different now. Everything I read pointed to one thing: lethal magic. Some of those theories were mine, published under Jonas's name. The signs were clear. War was coming, or had already begun. But I didn't know who was fighting, or how deeply my family was involved. Lucas told me not to worry. If my family were truly at war, they wouldn't be able to care for me like this. He was right. There was something more important than the continent. My condition came first. That was the path I chose. Father made the right decision, and I accepted it. Once you choose, you don't look back. Even after 20 years, my condition hadn't improved at all. Mana still tore through me like a curse. There was no room for distractions. It was already too late to turn back. Even if I survived, nothing would change. Still, I didn't stop. If I fell, I would stand up again. That was who I was. A Goethe never gives up. He handed me a wooden sword, watching my reaction. I silently took it, already knowing this wouldn't be easy. His gaze was steady, measuring me, like he was deciding whether I was even worth teaching. The moment our swords crossed, I felt the gap, not just in strength, but in experience. My body couldn't keep up with what I saw. Every move I understood, but failed to execute. Still, I didn't back down. Even if I had to crawl, I would keep moving forward. I was breathing heavily, barely able to stay on my feet. He didn't move, just watched, like this was all part of the lesson. He suddenly spoke, his voice sharp and serious. Every word hit harder than the blows I just took. Without thinking, I smirked slightly. If this was supposed to break me, he clearly underestimated me. Then everything shifted. A new presence, someone far more dangerous, had appeared. The air changed instantly. Even he tensed up, which told me this situation was far from normal. I stared at the man in front of me, calm on the outside, but something inside me was already starting to crack. He spoke casually like it was nothing, but I could see it. Even Lucas was uneasy about this situation. I answered without hesitation, keeping my voice steady. If I showed even a hint of weakness here, everything would collapse again. I turned away and started walking down the hallway. There was nothing more to say. Not to them, not anymore. Behind me, I could still feel their eyes. Confused, uncertain, like they no longer understood who I was. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look back. If I turned around now, I knew I wouldn't be able to stop myself. Lucas kept talking like usual, trying to ease the tension, but both of us knew this wasn't something that could be laughed off anymore. My jaw tightened. Every word he said only made it harder to maintain control. I faced him directly. There was no anger in my voice, and that made it even heavier. Then it happened again. A clear sign that staying by my side was slowly killing him. I moved before thinking. My hand reached out on its own, gripping his shoulder as if I could stop what was already happening. Don't talk. My voice came out colder than I expected. But it was the only way to keep him alive. He smiled. Even now, he was trying to reassure me as if nothing had changed. I turned away. If I kept looking at him, I knew I would hesitate, and hesitation would kill him. Leave. This time I didn't repeat myself, because deep down, I already knew this might be the last time. I tightened my grip on his arm. If I let go now, he wouldn't leave. Stop pretending. My voice was low, almost cold, but it was the only way to push him away. His expression changed. Not fear, not anger, just quiet understanding. We stood facing each other in silence. Neither of us moved, because both of us already knew the truth. This time I didn't look at him when I said it. I kept my gaze forward. Even when I heard his steps, I didn't turn around. He was still there. Of course he was. He never listened when it mattered. Why are you still here? I already knew the answer, but I asked anyway. He coughed again. This time, it wasn't something he could hide. Blood. That single drop said more than any words ever could. I stopped right in front of him. If I said anything more, I wouldn't be able to take it back. Leave. Just one word. That was all I allowed myself to say. He smiled. Even now, he was still trying to make this easier for me. My chest tightened. I shouldn't feel anything, but it still hurt. I turned away first because if I didn't, I might have stopped him. He stepped out, and just like that, the door became a wall between us. I didn't follow him. I didn't call out his name. He slowed down. For a second, it felt like he might turn back, but he didn't, and I didn't stop him. The distance between us grew step by step until it became something I couldn't cross anymore. I stood there for a long moment, just staring at the empty doorway in silence, as if he might come back any second. But no footsteps followed. No voice called out to me, only the cold, suffocating silence remained. It felt like something inside me, something I didn't even notice before, had quietly gone completely numb. I slowly lowered my head, not because I had given up, but because I truly didn't know what I was supposed to feel anymore. In the end, after everything that had just happened, I was left standing there completely alone once again. My legs slowly gave out beneath me, and before I even realized it, I had sunk down onto the cold stone floor. My breath was uneven, my body trembling slightly, as if something deep inside me was breaking apart. I clenched my teeth, trying to hold it together, but even that felt meaningless now. Then suddenly, memories I didn't expect began to surface, one after another. Warm light, soft voices, a place that felt nothing like this cold, empty cell. They were all there, standing around the table as if nothing had ever gone wrong. The room felt warm, quiet. like a place I once belonged to. Then the door opened, and he stepped inside, carrying the cold from outside with him. My body moved on its own. I reached out toward him without even thinking why. But something felt wrong, like this moment shouldn't exist, like it was already slipping away. "Don't go." My voice came out shaky as if I was afraid this moment would disappear forever. For a second, everything felt real. Their faces, their voices, even the warmth in the air. Then, the world cracked. A violent shock tore everything apart right in front of me. The warmth vanished instantly, replaced by silence, dust, and bodies that no longer moved. My chest tightened, and I finally understood none of this was ever real. I jolted awake, my body tense, breath uneven, as if I had just been torn out of something real. My hand moved to my chest instinctively. The pain was gone, but the feeling of loss remained, so it wasn't real after all. The words left my mouth quietly, yet they felt heavier than anything before. I sat there in silence, staring at the cold wall, trying to piece together what was memory and what had just been an illusion. No matter how I thought about it, that warmth, those voices, they were already out of reach. I steadied my breathing, slowly, deliberately, forcing my thoughts to settle instead of letting them spiral out of control. That man, his presence still lingered in my mind, like something I wasn't supposed to forget. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt structured, intentional, as if someone had shown me something on purpose. My expression hardened. If that was the case, then there was meaning behind everything I saw. I lowered my gaze to the book in front of me, realizing for the first time, this place might be more than just a prison. I sat down, surrounded by books I didn't understand, yet somehow, I knew I had to. The symbols, the diagrams, they looked unfamiliar, but not entirely impossible to grasp. I traced the lines with my fingers, breaking everything down piece by piece, as if solving a puzzle meant for someone else. Time passed without me noticing. The more I read, the clearer it all began to feel. This wasn't random knowledge, this was power, and I had just taken my first step toward it. I kept writing again and again, forcing every concept into memory. Even the smallest detail mattered. One mistake, and everything would fall apart. So I analyzed it all, patterns, structures, connections, until it finally started to make sense. This wasn't talent, this was repetition, pure, relentless effort. And for the first time, I felt it. I was no longer powerless. I didn't stop. Not for a second. Not until every page made sense. Stack after stack, line after line, I consumed everything I could. At some point, I stopped feeling lost and started seeing the logic behind it all. The fear was gone. In its place, it was something far more dangerous. Focus, clarity, control. I had nothing, no talent, no place in this world. But now, I finally understood something. If I couldn't rely on talent, then I'd build everything myself. Even if it took years, even if it broke me, I would become something this world could never ignore. And that was the beginning of everything. Because in this world, power isn't given, it's taken. Lucas died. The vessel shattered. There was an explosion. After that, no one was allowed to enter this room. Everything, food, clothes, even waste, came through a small slot in the door. And me, I stayed here, alone. I should have stayed distant. I should have never let myself care. If I had kept them at arm's length, they might still be alive, living normal lives. Instead, I dragged them into my world and destroyed everything. Regret, I came too late. It always does. And in the end, nothing remained, except pain. Time passed, and I stopped resisting it. Days blurred into years inside these walls. I didn't eat, I didn't move, I just existed, drowning in what was left of me. But even despair has limits. At some point, the pain stopped growing. What remained wasn't grief anymore. It was something colder, something empty. And that emptiness finally spoke to me. If I couldn't rely on strength, then I would rely on my mind. I gathered every scrap of knowledge I had and began rebuilding myself from nothing. Patterns, memories, fragments of what I once knew, slowly aligning again. Even in this place, there were rules, and rules could be broken. Survival wasn't given here, it was taken. The food came, like feeding an animal. No words, no faces, just a hand through iron. I checked everything first. Smell, texture, decay. But edible. I didn't hesitate. Hesitation was death. Every bite tasted like survival. Not hunger, not disgust, just necessity. The door finally opened. Not for food, not for silence, for me. For the first time, I stood face to face with someone. Who are you? My voice sounded strange, even to me. Then I saw it. Not a mirror, but worse. That face, thin, hollow, broken. That was me. The door opened, and the one who walked in was my father, the man who was supposed to kill me. But his eyes didn't hold killing intent, only hesitation. I looked at myself and saw what he saw. Without a word, he chose not to kill me. The door opened, and my father stood there with a sword in his hand, not as a visitor, as the man sent to end me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. His eyes were cold, but I could see it. He hated this as much as I did. I thought he would give me some final words, a curse, an apology, but he only looked at me like I was already dead. Then he handed me a mirror, and for the first time, I saw what prison had turned me into. Without a word, my father stood behind me. The blade never touched my neck. Instead, he began cutting my ruined hair. I kept my head down and said nothing. If this was his mercy, it hurt more than hatred. I understood then. He had come to kill me. But the man behind those eyes was still my father. He drew the sword again, yet his hand hesitated as if the blade itself had become too heavy. I didn't beg, I didn't run, I only waited because both of us already knew this was wrong. Then, for the first time in years, his hand touched my head, not like an executioner, like a father saying goodbye. He didn't say goodbye, he just turned his back and left me alive. For a long time, I just sat there, trying to understand why I was still breathing. Then I noticed it. Something he had left behind. On purpose. A book, not a farewell, but a message. Whatever this was, it was the only thing he chose to give me. Inside, there was something else. A letter hidden between the pages. My name was written on it, in his handwriting. I didn't know what to expect, but I couldn't stop reading. Every word felt heavier than a blade. This wasn't mercy, it was truth. And for the first time, I realized my death had already been decided long ago. This wasn't just a book, it was a guide, and someone had already walked this path before me. The more I read, the clearer everything became. This wasn't despair anymore, this was strategy. Every line I drew was a step toward survival. If I wanted to survive, I couldn't miss a single detail. Everything mattered. The symbols weren't random. Everything was connected. This world wasn't chaos, it followed rules. And anything with rules can be broken. Once I understand the rules of this world, I won't just follow them. I'll bend them, control them, and make sure they never control me again. The runes carved into the stone weren't random. I could feel a structure behind them, like a language I almost understood. I turned it in my hands, studying every line, every scratch, trying to find a pattern hidden beneath the surface. This body was weaker, but my mind wasn't. I could still think, analyze, break things down piece by piece. If these symbols had meaning, then they could be decoded. And if they could be decoded, they could be used. I started testing small assumptions, linking shapes together, searching for repetition, anything that felt intentional. The more I focused, the clearer it became. This wasn't decoration. It was a system that followed rules I could learn, memorize, and eventually exploit. I etched the symbols carefully, copying them again and again, forcing my brain to recognize their logic. Even the simplest mistake could ruin everything, so I moved slowly, making sure every line was precise. If I wanted to survive here, I couldn't rely on luck. I had to master this from the ground up. My body still felt weak, like it could collapse at any moment. But I forced myself to stay still and think. If I wanted to survive here, I had to understand everything. Every symbol, every pattern, every detail mattered. Because one mistake, it would mean death. The groove wasn't shallow, this wasn't decoration. Someone carved this with purpose. These lines, they weren't symbols I knew, but my hand moved like I'd seen them before. The moment I followed the curve exactly, something clicked into place. Faint glow. Yeah, I was on the right track. So it reacts to precision, not guessing. I slowed down, adjusted the angle, and kept carving. Every stroke had to match. No hesitation, no deviation. At some point, I stopped thinking entirely. My body just followed through. When the final line connected, the whole pattern felt complete. And in that moment, I realized something had already started changing. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer that dying old man. My body, it felt light, stable, as if time itself had been rewritten. The decay was gone, but everything I had lived through remained. 70 years of regret, carved into something deeper than flesh. I stepped forward, looking, and the silence around me felt wrong. No voices, no life, not even the sound of wind. Then I saw it, what was left of Goda. Ruins, corpses, a place that had long since stopped being home. So this is the world I chose to ignore, and now I'm the only one left to face it. I walked through the ruins, stepping over what remained of the past. Bodies everywhere, silent witnesses to a war I never saw. This place, once filled with voices, had become a grave. Memories flickered. Laughter, warmth, all buried beneath the rubble. Then I stopped. Among the ruins and broken stone, something remained untouched. A single door, standing where everything else had already fallen apart. It was old, worn down by time and neglect. Cracks ran across the surface, deep and jagged. And yet, somehow, it was still standing. There was blood, dark, dried, soaked into the wood like it had been there for days. Too much to ignore, too real to misunderstand. Someone had been here, not long ago. Not in peace, but in pain. For a moment I hesitated. After everything I had seen, I thought nothing could shake me anymore, but this felt different. Still, I pushed the door open, and what waited inside was someone I never thought I would see again. Jonas. There was no mistaking it. Even like this, I would recognize him anywhere. His body felt too light, like something inside him had already disappeared. Long before I got here. I carried him out, step by step, through the silence, through the ruins. There was no one left to stop me. The cold hit harder outside, the wind, the snow. It felt like the world itself had already moved on. I laid him down gently, not like a corpse, but like someone who might still wake up. For a moment, I just stood there. Snow falling, covering everything, trying to erase what happened here. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anger, regret, or maybe something worse, something I didn't want to name. I touched the ground, frozen, lifeless, just like everything else in this place. This wasn't an accident. Someone did this, and I already knew I wouldn't let it end here. I thought I'd feel something at standing over a corpse like this, but all I felt was nothing, just cold. The wind cuts through me, but it's not the cold that bothers me, it's how empty I've become. Even my own thoughts sound distant, like they don't belong to me anymore, like I already died somewhere along the way. So I dig. Not because I care, but because there's nothing else left to do. Each shovel of dirt feels heavier than it should, or maybe I'm just getting weaker. This body, it used to breathe, exist. Now it's just weight, just something I need to get rid of. No prayers, no farewell, I don't have anything left to say. I thought this would end it, bury the past, and whatever was left of me. But the moment I stepped back, something felt wrong. The world went quiet, too quiet, and like it was watching me. Then I felt it, something crawling under my skin, burning. A spark, small, pathetic, but it refused to die. For the first time in a long while, I felt something real. Not grief, not fear, something worse, something alive.